Hey, Margie here. Do you have bloating or an uncomfortable feeling of fullness after eating, abdominal pain, or diarrhea? Well, if so, those may be symptoms of SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And this is a condition that's very common, yet often overlooked and misdiagnosed, but it's a root cause of osteoporosis. So it's something we really need to be aware of. And I'm very excited about this episode because our expert today is really world renowned on SIBO, and it's Dr. Allison Siebecker. And Dr. Siebecker has been specializing in SIBO since 2011. She was the co founder and former medical director of the SIBO Center for Digestive Health at the National University of Natural Medicine. She has been teaching advanced gastroenterology since 2013 and is an award-winning author. Her integrative SIBO protocols have helped thousands worldwide, and I personally rely upon Dr. Siebecker's protocols in managing patients with SIBO. In this interview, Dr. Siebecker gives us so much fabulous information about SIBO, how it's diagnosed, how it's treated, so you definitely don't want to miss it. And she has so many free resources she's offering us. So make sure to check that out in the show notes. So stay tuned. Welcome, Dr. Siebecker. I'm so excited to have you here on the podcast. This is such an important topic and one that people really don't get right. And so I know you're going to clear things up and really shed light. And there's just no one better that I want. I was just so happy when you agreed to this because if anyone can really shed light on how important this is and what people can do, it's you. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, well, I'm just thrilled. So let's just start from the very beginning of let's just define SIBO, what it is, because a lot of times, people have all sorts of digestive issues and, they sometimes just group it under IBS or they group it under some big names and people just have no clue. So why don't we start with the basics of what it is?
Well, it wouldn't be wrong to group it under IBS, I suppose, because the big exciting discovery that has happened in the last 10 to 15 years is that SIBO is the primary or majority cause of IBS. There are many causes for IBS. IBS is just a grouping of symptoms, the common digestive symptoms people can have, which is abdominal bloating or distension, basically, pain or discomfort, constipation, diarrhea, or a mixture of those, and other symptoms can come. But those are the basic symptoms of IBS. And so no one knew what caused it. And it has been discovered that SIBO is the primary cause. And so what it is just when normal bacteria that live in the small intestine and or large intestine, but we think more so now small intestine, accumulate, basically overgrow. We should have a pretty small amount there because otherwise they interfere with digestion and absorption of food, which is the problem in SIBO because they overgrow. So we should have a small amount. And when there's too many, it causes a lot of problems. So it's basically what it is just too many bacteria in the small intestine. That's not normal. So it's a kind of simple, the name describes it, but
Yeah.
of course there's more to it.
So how do people get it? It just doesn't appear. Like, what are the,
Right.
yeah. So why don't we share how people get this?
Like from the body perspective, from the physiologically, what occurs is either there's a slowing down of the movement in the small intestine, not necessarily the large intestine, that could be moving quickly, but the small intestine, some kind of stagnation or stasis. And we refer to this as a slowing of the migrating motor complex, or the MMC for short. This is the natural motility that's meant to clear bacteria out of the small intestine on a daily basis. It occurs during fasting. So between meals and overnight, it should always be sweeping, cleaning. And there are many, many circumstances and diseases that can slow that, which I'll describe in a second. But the other thing would be some sort of structural problem anatomically where there's an obstruction or a partial obstruction, a twist or a kink, or maybe a pocket like a diverticula in the small intestine that's gathering bacteria, no way to clean it out, things like that. So there could be like structural or anatomic abnormalities, and then there can be this slowing. So, some of the diseases or the ways we would know what are the real risk factors, the most common one has been shown to be actually food poisoning or stomach flu, traveler's diarrhea. It's got a lot of names, but basically, it's bacterial gastroenteritis. And what can happen in some people, many people get food poisoning and they recover, nothing ever happens. But in a certain percentage of people, it can trigger an autoimmune situation where the immune system is damaging nerves in the small intestine, and we need nerves to create the movement of the migrating motor complex. So that slows down. Other things would be like diabetes, hypothyroid, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, scleroderma, Parkinson's, traumatic brain injury. There are many, honestly, the list of causes is very, very long. And that sort of helps to explain why it's so common. And even just the food poisoning itself, because most everyone's had food poisoning more than once. So it's just, happens. So that alone is probably enough to explain why IBS SIBO is so common. But then when you see the whole other list of all these other diseases, everybody probably knows somebody with diabetes or hypothyroid, it really starts to make sense.
Wow. So before we go into like how they truly diagnose it, what symptoms, is there anything that would differentiate it, from someone that's just having stomach pain or that's just having indigestion? Or what are the things that really make you think this could be SIBO? Like when you're listening to your patients and when you hear them, you're like, sounds like it could be before they get the actual diagnostic test.
Probably the keynote symptom is bloating that's very bothersome and may not really go away. And by that I mean where the belly is swelling outward. Medically, that's called distension, but most everyone just calls that bloating. So where and it's from food. So no matter what I eat, everything I eat gives me bloating. I'm bloated. It's not female hormonal time of the month bloating. It's from food, and it can be distinctly seen that person swells up. So that's probably the keynote. But unfortunately, there are many other the we call it the differential diagnosis, right? The other diseases that have the same symptoms are very, very numerous. So unfortunately, you can't actually just by symptoms know that it's SIBO or the 35 other things it could be. That's why we have to do a test. So to truly know it's SIBO, it's one of the big problems we have is that the symptoms, the IBS like symptoms, are so common in so many conditions. And to figure out what it is, you have to test.
Okay, so let's talk about testing because it's very interesting what different doctors do, and, you hear about different new tests. So please shed some light on your recommendations for testing.
Yeah, what I like to recommend, well, generally we use the SIBO breath test, and it's testing for the gases that the bacteria make, hydrogen, methane, and also now hydrogen sulfide. We can test for that with one lab in the US. Um, and I like the lactulose 3-hour breath test with 10 tubes, if we're getting very specific
Yeah,
about it.
no, it's important. Yeah.
Because there are many tests that offer, like the hydrogen sulfide test offers a 2-hour, and really we need three because the first 2 hours generally represents the small intestine, and the third hour generally represents the large intestine. And when I briefly said what SIBO is, I didn't go into this detail, so I'll do it now. There's three types of SIBO generally, based on the gases that the bacteria make. So hydrogen, methane, and hydrogen sulfide. And the methane type of SIBO actually has been renamed to be intestinal methanogen overgrowth because methane gas is made by archaea or methanogens, and they're not bacteria. And so, like, technically, linguistically, SIBO with the B for bacteria wasn't correct. So they had to give it a different name. It's the same old thing we've always known, but it has a new name. So these types of bacteria make different gases. So the methane type and the hydrogen sulfide type, they actually can overgrow in the large intestine as well as the small intestine. And therefore, it is extremely helpful when we run the test if we can do it for 3 hours, because then we can see the full picture. It really helps us with our methane and hydrogen sulfide diagnosis, because when we use the test, we aren't just saying yes or no. we are getting information about which gases are there. And this is important because treatment is based on gas type. There are different treatments for the different gases because there are different bacteria or archaea that are creating these gases. We have to aim our treatments at those different organisms. And also the severity of the gas. We see the severity of the gas. You can't tell the severity of basically the gas by symptoms. About half the time it matches, and I'd say even maybe more than half the time you can't tell. So, for instance, somebody could have mild to moderate symptoms, but have very severely high gas. So, that also helps us with treatment because we know that often we need more than one course or one round of a pharmaceutical or herbal antibacterial to treat it. We could talk more about that later. But when we see the severity, that helps us project how long the treatment's going to take, how many rounds we're going to need. So the test is extremely helpful. So that's what I like, a lactulose 3-hour breath test. And by the way, the test that tests for hydrogen sulfide, it's by I can mention brands, right?
Oh, of course. Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm so used to continuing medical education where you can't mention
Yes.
brands. You know, so I always check.
Yeah, no, this is a podcast. We're just trying to help people, give them as much information as possible. So, no, please share what brands you find to be most
Okay,
effective.
perfect.
Absolutely.
So it's Gemelli Labs, and the test is called Trio Smart, the one that does all three gases. And it's a 2-hour, but what you can do is you can just sample. They recommend sampling breath every 15 minutes. There is a reason they recommend it. It has to do with technicalities with studies. But I would recommend sampling breath every 22 minutes, and that stretches the test to very close to 3 hours. And they adjust their graph. You don't have to, there's no problem for the lab. They just adjust their graph report when you take the breath every 20 or 22 minutes. So that's what I would recommend if you're using that. Otherwise, there are many, many laboratories that offer a 3-hour 10 tube breath test, so many. I mean, you can see a list on I have a free educational website. We were talking about that before we started, siboinfo.com. And I have a list of many labs where you can see who offer that.
And typically, is this something people can send in? I know there's some, or do you need to go somewhere and actually physically do the test?
Oh, such a good question. Wonderfully, there are test kits that you can perform this at home. And the test is non-invasive. It's pretty simple. It does require a 1-day prep diet that nobody likes, but it's not the end of the world, and it's 1 day, and then an overnight fast. And then the next morning, patients can do their test and then mail the kit in. You can also do it in a doctor's office or a hospital or a clinic that has the machine. And then, of course, they have the results immediately from when they analyze it. But either way works very well.
Is it typically covered if you went to your physician, your GI? Is it typically then it would be more likely covered then by your insurance or?
I don't think that makes a difference. I
Oh,
could be
okay.
wrong on that, and I know plans are different, but many of the laboratories with test kits it's covered, and then some don't. It's always so tricky with insurances, what's covered and isn't, but oftentimes it can be.
It's so interesting about the diagnosis because I know of certain facilities that are great facilities or, conventional, very high level hospitals and wonderful places. And they say, oh, the symptoms seem like SIBO. We'll just treat it. I've seen this so often where they don't do the testing and they're missing all the information. But then they say, oh, if it works, it was SIBO. So
Okay,
what do you,
so
what do
this
you
is
think of that?
this is what I have to say. I understand that. That's, empirical treatment, right? And this is a valid form of practicing medicine, right? Empiric treatment. And so what I say is if that works out, great. It's wonderful. Everybody's happy, and you're lucky. And that's wonderful. But when it doesn't work out, then you have to start being a bit more methodical. So, and there's many people that doesn't work out for. So when that happens, then it's time to run the test and figure out what gases are present, target your treatment to which gases are present, how high the gases are, and start planning for how many rounds you're going to need. And the other thing that I want to say is that it's extremely common for people to have success with one round of pharmaceutical antibiotics. What's extremely common is that then they will backslide or relapse, so to speak, after about 2 weeks. And what that means is that the treatment wasn't finished. It's kind of like, when you get antibiotics for like a sinus infection or something, and they say you have to take the whole 7-day course, don't stop at 2 or 3 days. It's sort of like that. Like you treat it, you feel better, but you're not actually done. And many doctors, many people don't know one round isn't truly going to be enough. They would have known if they would have run the tests and see how high the gas was, and then they would have tested again. I'm a big proponent of retesting afterwards to see how much has come down and what's left to do. But because I have done that with all of my patients, before and after tests, I know the basic patterns and the ways it goes. And so basically, it just means the gas isn't finished being reduced to negative yet. So you got some great symptom relief, but the bacterial overgrowth is still present, and you have to continue treating. So that's what I have to say about that. Wonderful if it works. I see no real harm in trying it. The only harm I would say, there's only like twofold harm I could say, is if it didn't work, you've sort of wasted a little bit of time. I find that being methodical from the get-go with testing and targeting your treatment correctly ultimately saves time and money in the end, because we see people, they're strung out for years of without enough proper testing and everything. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, we don't really have to worry about it with the main antibiotic so much for SIBO, which is rifaximin, sold as Xifaxan, because it doesn't have published, studied antibiotic resistance. But clinically, we do see tolerance, tachyphylaxis, where basically people become tolerant to it working. That's the only other danger, is that you might have wasted a treatment. Maybe now somebody has become somewhat tolerant to it or resistant to it, and you could have used it better in your first go if you'd known what you were doing and what the lay of the land was. But those aren't major dangers. They're just little things to think about.
Well, it's interesting because, as I said, so many people in my community of working with people with osteoporosis, we're going to talk about the connection in a minute, but so many people have a SIBO that I've worked with over the years. And it's so frustrating. Exactly what you said happens. They're given the rifaximin and they get better, but they were never tested. And then it comes back. And then, you don't know what really was the cause or what their numbers were or how bad it was. And oftentimes then they just want to put them back on, not even thinking about the migrating motor complex, as you said. So it's so much better, I think, when you're saying when you start and you're methodical from the beginning, because then you're just trying to figure out. But unfortunately, and then the doctors will say, oh, yeah, it comes back. We just give them another dose. We just give it again, the antibiotic. So, yeah. So we're going to go into the treatment,
Yeah,
all the
there's things
different
to do
options.
to
But
help
yeah,
promote remission. We could talk about that for sure. There's things that are missing to help that remission period.
yeah, actually, you wanna talk about that first, or you wanna talk about the
Yeah,
connection with osteoporosis? You wanna talk
sure.
about.
We'll talk about the remission thing,
Yeah, because
because
it's so important.
basically, statistically, what we know from studies is that about a third of all SIBO cases can resolve, like meaning it will not be chronic. You treat it, it goes away, and it doesn't come back. And that's wonderful. But that means the majority, two-thirds. And I think the study's actually underrepresented it. It's probably a little more than two-thirds of all cases will be chronic. And briefly, the reason for that is because many of the conditions that cause SIBO are chronic or have no known cure, basically, at this time. Just even the food poisoning one, the autoimmune damage that occurs, there is no known cure for that at this time. It is being actively researched by our lead researcher in SIBO, Dr. Pimentel, and I believe he will find a cure, so to speak, or a solution. But diabetes, it can be managed, but we don't know how to erase it, right? Many of these conditions. So many people will have it chronically, and what that means is there will be a relapse. Now, when the relapse is right at 2 weeks, usually or very soon, usually it means that you're just not done with your actual treatment course, getting the test to negative. But a typical time for relapse after getting rid of it, getting the test negative, is honestly, in studies, they showed about 2.5 months. Now, that's usually only at the beginning when we're first working with someone with SIBO. Once we start playing around and adding in these things to help remissions, we can extend it much longer, like maybe a year before relapse occurs, which is, not that burdensome. So what we do when the test is negative is we give some kind of SIBO diet, which is always going to be some kind of reduced carbohydrate diet. And usually it doesn't need to be very strict at this point because the test is negative, the symptoms aren't bad, there's not an overgrowth, but just some kind of a reduced carbohydrate diet, just so we're not, carbohydrates are bacteria's favorite food. And so just so we're not actively, encouraging them to grow. And the other thing is we give something that helps to make sure the migrating motor complex is working, and that is a prokinetic. And prokinetics are really agents, they can be natural or pharmaceutical, that stimulate the migrating motor complex in the stomach and small intestine. They are not laxatives. They are not meant to stimulate the large intestine. Some of them can, some of the pharmaceutical ones can, particularly at higher dose. The dose matters. We use a low dose. But mostly they are really about the stomach and small intestine, stimulating that cleansing wave when we're fasting. So diet, prokinetics, and then also meal spacing helps. So not snacking between meals, leaving a space where you're not having any calorie beverages or food between meals. And the optimal time is really about 4 hours. If you can't do that long, then whatever you can do is better than nothing. But that really makes a difference. It gives the migrating motor complex a chance to happen because it's turned off by food and calories. So, because it only occurs in fasting. So that's the missing piece for most people, I would say. I'd say it's probably the number one reason why people would come to me as patients and their treatments had failed or they were having problems, um, is they weren't put on a prokinetic.
And what are your favorite prokinetics? Do you typically like the ginger or the herbal, or do you have certain ones that you find are most effective from your experience?
Yeah, I like to joke about it because, I'm so intimately connected with all these prokinetics. I know them so well. I think of them like my children. There's no favorite, right? It's like they're all wonderful. So, so for the natural ones, we use ginger root. That's famous. That's why it helps with nausea. It's studied and shown to help the movement of the stomach and migrating motor complex. So ginger root, and then we have an herbal combination from Germany called Iberogast, doesn't have ginger in it. And that's been studied head to head against pharmaceutical prokinetics for dyspepsia and shown to work very well. So we know it has prokinetic activity. Um, and then we have all these ginger containing prokinetic combinations, these sort of herbal supplement combination formulas. There are so many of them now. Motility activator, um, uh, modal pro, prokine. There's a lot of these. They're all very good. On the pharmaceutical side, we have prucalopride, which is sold in the US as Motegrity. We have low-dose erythromycin. We call it LDE for short. That's a standard of care for gastroparesis, slow stomach emptying. So it's an excellent upper GI prokinetic. And most people know of erythromycin as an antibiotic, but in very low dose, it's used as a prokinetic. And then we have LDE, low dose naltrexone, which many people know about for its wonderful benefits. It's anti-inflammatory, helps with pain, helps balance the immune system. So it's a good choice for people who have the food poisoning cause of SIBO. And it has prokinetic activity, can help mood, it does all these wonderful things. But it's been shown in studies to have prokinetic activity. And it may not be strong enough in everybody. We find it's not a strong enough prokinetic for some of our more tough cases. So the one that I think is the most truly effective is the prucalopride, and it's very safe. So there are many prokinetics that are not safe and have been removed from the market or used in some countries, not in others. But these are all safe prokinetics. A low-dose erythromycin can cause prolonged QT waves, so you do need to know if your patients, for any doctors listening, have issues with that. But I've used it in so many patients with complete safety. So these are all, and you can combine them, by the way, and they're all excellent choices. They all have different mechanisms of action, believe it or not. So we very often, for tough cases, we'll use 2 or even 3.
Oh, that's great. And then, okay, so they want to just quickly, there's so much information, but this is so important because for people listening who have this, there's treatment that works. And so it's, you want to just explain also the different, so you talked about the antibiotic. Do you want to just talk about the other options people have?
Yes, I can just quickly go over all of them.
Yeah.
So the three antibacterial options are pharmaceutical antibiotics, herbal antibiotics, and elemental diet. So pharmaceutical antibiotics, of course, everybody knows what they are. We have different ones for the different types of gas because of the different organisms. So we use rifaximin for hydrogen. For methane, we use rifaximin plus either neomycin or metronidazole. And then for hydrogen sulfide, we use rifaximin plus bismuth. Bismuth actually is one of the main things that's been studied to help with hydrogen sul-5. There are a few other antibiotics we sometimes use. For instance, Alinea or nitazoxanide is its drug name. That can be used for all of those types. It has activity for all of them, and we usually combine them. So, and there's a few others, but those are our core ones. So you can see when you're treating methane or hydrogen sulfide, it's basically double antibiotic therapy. That's a big mistake in treatment that is often made for a patient who has. One thing I didn't mention is that there's a correlation of bowel movement symptoms with gases. So diarrhea correlates more with hydrogen and hydrogen sulfide, and constipation correlates more with methane. Although honestly, clinically, we find with hydrogen sulfide, it's about 50-50 constipation or diarrhea. So the problem is you can't quite tell necessarily by the symptoms. You would want to immediately say, oh, if there's constipation, there's methane, but there could be methane and hydrogen sulfide. And so you kind of need to know what you're treating. And so a very common mistake is that patients are just given rifaximin, but they have constipation and they actually have the methane or the EMO type of SIBO. And it doesn't really work very well because they needed it to be rifaximin with neomycin or rifaximin with metronidazole. So this is probably the second most common problem I saw in practice. So that's the antibiotics. Now for the herbals, it's very similar in that we have a few herbs that work for hydrogen, like rifaximin works for hydrogen. And those are berberine-containing herbs like golden seal, Oregon grape, I can't think of the others for the herb names, but you can buy like berberine as the name of like a complex. And we have oregano, and then we have neem. We know all of those work on hydrogen. Then when you have methane, we add either allicin, and this is an extract from garlic, and we typically use the product Alimed, which is also used to also be sold as Alimax Pro. I think they're switching now to just Alimed. We use this because it's like a purified form of the allicin. We don't like to use garlic oil or whole garlic or aged garlic because garlic has a lot of FOS, which is an oligosaccharide, a carbohydrate that readily feeds the bacteria and can worsen symptoms. And so we really want to use the actual like antibacterial component of the garlic that's been purified out. So we use the Alimed. And so we either use that or a little combination called atrantil that's been studied and shown to help with methane. So we add one of those two to either berberine, oregano, or neem. So that's how we handle that. And for hydrogen sulfide, again, we've got the bismuth. And we also find that high dose oregano will work for hydrogen sulfide. So it's an old blastocystis hominis treatment, actually, but it works for the hydrogen sulfide. So we combine some of the hydrogen herbs with those. So that's what we do for herbals. Then for elemental diet, this is a medical food beverage. It's powdered nutrients that are in close to their most simplified form. So for instance, the protein is amino acid or mostly amino acid. And the fat is not fatty acids. It's actually just fat. And then we've got carbohydrates in their somewhat simple forms. And so this is used because when it's drunk, it absorbs so quickly, it just moves right on past those bacteria and they don't get a chance to eat it. And then they wind up starving. So it's a different method of being an antibacterial. Basically, it starves them. You do it for 2 weeks, just like you would a antibiotic. I forgot to say, pharmaceutical antibiotics, a 2-week course is standard. Sometimes we go to 3. Elemental diet, same. Herbal antibiotics take longer. So a standard course is 4 weeks, and sometimes we go to 6. So this treatment is special, the elemental diet, because it has the ability to reduce more gas in the 2-week course than the other options. We typically see reductions around 100 parts per million of gas, whereas typically with the other treatments, average we see around 30 parts per million. So it's I guess it's generally considered to be more effective in that we can get more gas reduced in the same amount of time. But it is a challenging treatment because you're not eating food during this period, solids. You're consuming your nutrients as fluid, and that's challenging. So many people will put that off to the end, but by the time they do it, they almost all of them say, "I wish I just started with this." Now, one little caveat I want to say about all of these treatments is what we find as a clinical pattern is that it's very common for one or two of these treatment types to not be a good match for a given individual. So oftentimes we'll find, one of these treatments just doesn't work at all. We don't exactly know why. So we switch over to a different type. So let's say the elemental diet didn't work, then we switch to pharmaceutical antibiotics and it works. We try pharmaceutical antibiotics on a patient, it doesn't work at all. We switch over to herbals, it works. And it's like that with all three. That's something you just need to know about and not freak out if it happens to you or your patients. You just move on to a different treatment. It's common.
Oh, wow. And a lot of times people will think, oh, I'll just do the diet. But that's so two questions though. But when they're tested, should people if they're trying that diet, the FODMAPs, should they get off that diet when they're being tested for the
Well, so
gas?
FODMAPs is just one of about 5 or 6 or even 7 SIBO diets that we
Yeah.
have. It's famous though, many people know of it. Um, I do recommend that if at all possible, you test before you go on a diet because the diet can reduce the sort of the gas and the bacteria a little bit. It doesn't cure it, but it reduces it a little bit. So you'll get a better sense of what's truly there if you can test before going on a diet. But if you're already on a diet, then just test and it'll show where you're at because we know that's the thing. That's why how we know these diets don't take it away because all these people we've tested who are on SIBO diets, they still test positive. The bacterial overgrowth is still there. What the diet does is help with symptoms. I mean, it's truly incredible for helping with symptoms when you fiddle around with it and customize it to yourself. You can start with any of the SIBO diets and then you customize it to yourself. And what that means is some of the things that they say you shouldn't have, you'll find you can have with no symptoms. And some of the things that they say you're fine with, everyone should be fine with, you will not be fine with, and you'll have to eliminate that. That's just no diet can figure out each individual. So,
Got it. I mean, this is just so incredibly helpful and knowing
oh,
that
actually,
yes?
there's one other thing I forgot to say. Many people use herbal antibiotic combination formulas. What I told you about was basically combining single herbs like we would antibiotics. But what many people do is they choose a combination formula. And in fact, we have a study that was done on SIBO with some combination formulas, Metagetics, Candibactin, AR, and BR, and then Biotics, FC-Cytal, and Dysbiocide. However, they were not looking at methane or hydrogen sulfide in that study. And so, and what we find is that that's a problem. So people will just start with these combination products, but they're not targeted for the gas they have. So if you wanted to use one of those combinations, you can, but you still are going to need to add in either the Alimet or the Altrantil if you've got methane, or the bismuth or high dose oregano if you have hydrogen sulfide. And this is akin to a gastroenterologist giving someone rifaximin without knowing that they need another antibiotic for their type of SIBO. This happens all the time.
Wow, so very interesting. So let's talk about osteoporosis. What is the relationship and why do so many people in my community have SIBO as well as osteoporosis?
I am not surprised because SIBO is considered a malabsorption disease. So, by very nature of the pathophysiology, it creates malabsorption of nutrients. And the reason why is because the overgrown bacteria are consuming our nutrients. As we take them in, they are eating them. That is why a person gets bloated. They eat them, then they excrete gas. In essence, they fart gas into us, into our small intestine, charming, and then we see the swelling. Well, that is, this is and the other symptoms. The gases are linked with the diarrhea and the constipation and the pain as well. So this is what we see. We know they are consuming our food. And so what happens is they are in essence stealing some of our nutrients. Another thing that happens is that they can create bile deconjugation. Bacteria normally do that. There should be a somewhat larger amount of bacteria in the end of the small intestine, just before the large intestine. And it's their job in that place to deconjugate bile so we can reabsorb bile in that location. But when they are located in the middle and the upper small intestine in large amounts, they deconjugate the bile there, and we need conjugated bile to absorb fat. So when they deconjugate it, then we can absorb fat. Well, that would include our fat soluble vitamins. And relevant here would be D3 and K2 to the osteoporosis discussion. So there actually are studies showing that those two vitamins can be low in people with SIBO. And by the way, another sign sometimes that you'll see with people with SIBO is you'll see what's called fatty stool, or just on a stool test there will be too much fat present in the sample, and that is an indication of SIBO because it is pretty common for it to cause fat malabsorption shown in the stool.
The way the question on that, so when
Yeah.
people look at their poop, they'll see it floating? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, but then sometimes you don't see it floating. You can't tell, but when the sample is actually analyzed, there will be too much fat in it.
Mm.
So you could see it. Fatty stool is very obvious, and it has a distinctive smell as well that is unpleasant and different. But it can also just be when a stool sample is analyzed, you see it there. So so these have all been shown, and also a very common problem with SIBO patients is anemia, actually, because the bacteria love to eat iron and B12, and so we can either have macrocytic or microcytic anemia occur. And what probably is even more common, this is just an aside here, is low ferritin. So it's not full anemia, but it's, pre-anemia basically. And, we all know parasites can cause that. Well, this is one of the reasons that can cause that. So in terms of osteopenia, osteoporosis, I just looked back before we were going to meet because I knew there were two studies that had looked at this with SIBO, and I'll mention them. They both found an association. And so one of them actually excluded patients that have predisposing conditions that could already cause, low bone density, which is interesting because these are all conditions that are very common for people with SIBO to have. So this was an even more strict test. I think it's probably the results were lower than we would even expect then. And they found that, and they had a control group, and they found that patients with SIBO had significantly low bone density in their hip and spine, and 43% greater fracture,
Wow.
spinal fracture than the control group. And they actually came out with a recommendation saying that when patients have osteopenia of unknown origin, SIBO should be considered. That should be looked at. So I was very pleased to see that. And in general, just they have low bone mineral density. And then in the other study, they did not exclude people, but they didn't give us percents. They just found that there was spine and hip mineral density and prevalence of bone loss that was significantly more than in the control group. And let me just see if there's anything I want to say about this. Oh, they just say that their results show that SIBO is an important cofactor. So they're not saying for sure it's a cause. That how could they prove that? They're just saying it's a cofactor in the development of metabolic bone disease, and that the severity of bone loss is related to the poor nutritional status and duration of the malabsorption symptom of and syndrome of SIBO.
That's so
So,
interesting. And it's just, I'm such a big believer in root cause, in that if we're truly going to heal, besides our bone health, just heal everything. And we need to dig deep, and we need to figure out what the root causes are. And this is one that I just see is so overlooked. And oh, everybody's bloated, no big deal. I just think, do you see that a lot? That people just don't realize these symptoms mean something and it's not okay. And there can
well,
be
if you've had them for a very long time, many people have had, they've had troubling digestive symptoms most of their lives. and maybe they stack on and get worse, or maybe they come and go. But so it's like they're just not thinking about it. When you start really thinking about it is particularly when there's pain. Pain is one of life's great motivators, right? So, but not everybody has pain, which is nice for them. But then maybe they're not thinking, "Gosh, something's amiss here." We really shouldn't be bloating we're eating, and we should have normal bowel movements. What is a normal bowel movement? It's formed, easy to pass, and happens at least once a day.
Yeah, no, that's so important. And it's just, again, as we said, this bloating that people think it's just okay. And so I think what you said is interesting that really everybody, if they're not sure what's going on, should rule out the SIBO unless it's not. So I guess what you're saying is that if it goes along with food, if they don't have that symptom, that it's not affected by food, then should they still be assessed? Or
I mean, it's always a good idea to rule it out because
yeah.
we know that I didn't give you the statistic, but it's around 70% of IBS is caused by SIBO. So um, it should really be the very first thing that is tested for and ruled out. And by the way, I also didn't mention there's a test to find out if food poisoning is the cause of SIBO. And it's being used as an IBS screening test, actually, to really separate out people who may have IBD, inflammatory bowel disease, from those who have IBS. And it's a blood test. And it tests for the antibodies that would be positive in the autoimmune situation after the food poisoning. And that Gemelli Labs does that test, and that's called the IBS SMART test. So it tests for vinculin and CDTB antibodies. And if those are positive, then we know that a person has IBS and has SIBO causing their IBS, which was caused by food poisoning. We also know that their migrating motor complex is slow because that it's directly damaging the migrating motor complex. So it's a very helpful test. I wish more primary care offices would run this test because it's a simple blood test. And then you're immediately separating people out. It has something like a 95, in the 90s percent of being um, correct in letting you know that it's IBS and not IBD. And the reason that's important is when people have these problems, a lot of times they're sent for colonoscopy, but a test like this could maybe help someone not have a colonoscopy, an unnecessary colonoscopy, put them down this way. And then you move on to the breath test.
Oh, I love that. That's really great. I have one other question to ask you because so many people take probiotics and that's one of the first things. Oh, I have an issue with my stomach. I'll start probiotics. And I know that's not for certain people that can actually exacerbate their problem. So what have you seen with probiotics?
It's so tricky because it's so individual. You know, it's frustrating because we have a lot of studies that have looked at probiotics and SIBO, and almost all of them are really positive. So they have excellent results. People having their symptoms decrease significantly, people having their gas levels go down, actually eradicating the SIBO. But then when we come to the clinical situation with our own patients, we just never really see that, even if we try and use the exact same probiotics that they've used. So it's a frustrating situation for everybody because we want those results. And I think it's probably just a matter of how incredibly individual each person's microbiome is and situation is. And so you have to find the right probiotic that works for you. But I think it's absolutely fine to try probiotics. My favorite time to try them, and which ones, by the way, in the studies, they used all the different types of probiotics. My friend Dr. Ruscio categorizes probiotics in three categories: Lactobacillus bifidus, those are your standard ones, most everyone's familiar with; probiotic yeast, which is Saccharomyces boulardii; and then spore forming or soil based. And those are the bacillus type ones. And these studies used all of those types, and all of them showed positive results. And they used single ones, they used big combinations, they used small combinations. So there's no real guidance here, So the best time I think to try them is before you're all done treating SIBO. So this goes against like the 4 Rs and the way that a lot of people think about doing it. They think about killing and then like rebuilding or replenishing after. I think you should begin with the probiotics before. The reason being is that Many SIBO patients are aggravated symptomatically by probiotics. And we want to know that ahead of time, or if they are aggravated, we know we're just going on to treat and things are going to get better. So I've just had a lot actually of negative experiences of waiting until it might have taken me a year to get, all the treatments I'm doing, get someone's test negative, depending on how difficult their case was. Work so hard. They're all better. Then I bring in something new, the probiotic, and it aggravates them. I don't want to do that. I want to start it before. I don't want to rock the boat when I did all that hard work to get them to a wonderful place. I would rather rock the boat when we're in the middle of treatment. So I think start as soon as you can and try different ones to see what works for you. And I generally think it's a wonderful idea. I also think if I was gonna choose, I would lean more towards bifidus. But then again, maybe not. There's so many options that can be good.
Oh, this has just been
Oh,
so
oh,
yeah.
I forgot to say, I forgot to bring up prebiotics. Prebiotics are, like pouring fuel right on the fire. They are pure bacterial food. So those are things like FOS and GOS and inulin and chicory and arabinogalactan. They are put in probiotics. You can either buy them by themselves as a supplement or they're put in probiotics. And they're good for somebody who doesn't have SIBO, but they're typically extremely aggravating for people who have SIBO. So you might find it's okay to have them in a very small amount, like listed in the other ingredients. But if they're a main ingredient with a milligram listing, I would avoid that um, because I mean, you could try it. Just know that it's common for people to get aggravated.
Wow, this has just been so amazing. So can you have some great courses? Just tell everyone what you offer. I mean, your website is I've used your website, oh, for probably 10 years. I've been referring people to that website because you have so much on there. But why don't you share all the different possibilities that, what you have?
Thank you. Makes me so happy to hear you're using it.
Yeah.
Yeah, website is siboinfo.com. And I have a course for patients and a course for professionals. The practitioner course has CME available with it. And it's a long course in that it covers everything, but I've both of them I've actually filmed in small segments, so you can go right to the section you're most interested in, and they're usually about 20-minute long or shorter videos, so you can get it in a lunch hour, etc., or a drive to and from work. And the patient one is a little bit shorter, and it's also geared towards helping you work with your practitioner. Studies you can bring to them, questions, things about how to get insurance coverage for your medicines, things like that, and just making sure you're not missing any steps. Of course, they both cover that. So we'll have coupons for anyone listening who might be interested in signing up for my courses.
Yeah, we made the coupon Happy Bone, so that's so great. Oh, well, this is any last minute things. This has been so helpful, and this is really extremely important, and I love your work, and you hate to see people suffer unnecessarily, and you've worked so hard to really dive into this and figure out what works and getting people on the right track so that they can live happy, healthy lives and improve their bone health in the process. But any last minute things you wanna leave with us?
Yeah, I would say not to give up. So if you've had treatment that hasn't, been as successful as you want, or if you're treating your patients and it's not going well, there are answers. You can even just go to my website for free. We've given a lot of answers here, but don't give up, especially the situation where somebody has had one treatment maybe and it just came back or wasn't effective enough. Don't give up. You should have more rounds of treatment. And really, it's actually common to get people to 80 to 90% symptom relief. That is the goal and what we see all the time. 90% symptom relief. That's incredible, right? And so if you don't have that, don't give up. Keep going.
Yeah, those are always my that's always my motto. Dig deep and don't give up, and I love that. Well, thank you so much for being here, and just thank you really for all the incredible work you've done in helping people truly all over the world, so thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. Just a pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Dr. Siebecker and now have a better understanding of SIBO and why it's something we want to make sure we evaluate And the good news is there's so much that can be done to treat it, as Dr. Siebecker discussed. Dr. Siebecker has fabulous resources for us. There's a free 9-step protocol about SIBO, as well as she has more extensive courses that if you use the coupon code Happy Bones, you'll get a significant discount. And she also has courses for practitioners that you can also use the code Happy Bones for a discount. And she's giving practitioners 3 free lessons so you can get an idea of what she teaches in the class. Well, all those links in the show notes. And make sure to download my free Improve Your Bone Health Naturally mini course. And that link is also in the show notes. So thank you so much for tuning in. And I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.